This is an ecological tour and biking tour that we're taking today. Now, that trail is the coast-to-coast trail for the state. It's also the River2Sea Trail. Some of the places we're going to go to is from here we'll go over to Gemini Springs. From Gemini Springs we'll go down to the DeBary Hall, meet with some folks there, learn a little bit more on the historical side of Southwest Volusia. Then we'll go to Thornby Park, over to Green Springs, down to the Garfield Crossings, and on down to Audubon Park, which is one of the premier birding parks in Southwest Volusia. And we'll see you on the trail. We just left the Sunrail station at DeBary. Again, the north end terminus of Sunrail at this time. We're on a little two-way road here. It's called Shell Road. It's a very quick, easy way to get up to the trail from the DeBary Sunrail station. Roger, one of the things that I know you're working on right now has to do with blue trails. Explain blue trails, if you would.
There's some established blue trails, which is waterway trails. You know, canoe, kayaking, those types of opportunities that actually go right along off of Lake Monroe, coming in towards the spring area, into the Gemini Springs. It's beautiful, very, very nice.
Over on the left-hand side, we have one of the trailheads. People have their cars parked there. From there, they either walk or take their bicycles here on the trail. Lovely spot.
You see a lot of riders.
Yeah, dappled sunlight. In the summertime, it makes for a very nice area, too. It's a little cooler. It's a beautiful park here. A lot of water, a lot of bird life, nature experience, just extraordinaire.
It's a beautiful piece of property.
It is.
We were lucky to acquire it back from Sandra and Charles Gray back in the early 1990s. But going back in time, the lands that we're walking on right now, it started back in 1894 when John Paget bought these lands.
Okay.
And from that point, he bought additional parcel, which is where the Paget house sits right now. I think that was back in 1896. And he was the caretaker at DeBary Hall.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, we're going there next after we leave here.
Yep, yeah, exactly right. And so he was the keeper of the hunting dogs during that period of time.
Yeah.
When you look around, you've got this great spring area here. The spring pushes out approximately 6 million gallons of water a day into the St. John's. You have fishing here. There's an open play area, playground, dog park, canoe kayak launch here, spring house, lots of pavilions, camping, nature trails, and also is one of the connection stops for the trail system.
Okay.
And when I say the trail system, I'm talking about the showcase trail system. That's a 12-foot wide paved asphalt trail. And Volusia County is really lucky now. So we're kind of connecting two major trail sections that are a priority in the state's trail system. One is the coast to coast, and it goes from Tampa, Hillsborough County area across the state into Titusville, Brevard County area.
Right.
It's approximately 275 miles or so. And so the other benefit there is right here where we're standing is kind of in close proximity to the St. John's River2Sea Loop, which is another 270-mile trail. And so it connects on the southern border of the St. John's Loop, is a part of the coast to coast. And so right from this area here, you can get to over 500 miles of connected 12-foot wide paved asphalt trail.
Within a quarter to a half mile of here, there's several osprey and bald eagles nests. Right. And except that the bald eagles leave us for a few months in the summer, these birds are here all year round. There was a pair of common gallinules swimming through the water on that side a little earlier. And we had been noting the tilapia in their nests behind us, and several largemouth bass for you fishermen. In the wooded areas around this, we've already heard this morning some Carolina wrens, several woodpeckers, red-bellied and downy woodpeckers. We do have, of course, the pileated woodpeckers. Haven't seen one yet today, but they're always here. and heard the northern parula warbler. We've also got the tufted titmouse and the other woodland birds in the area. Let's see what else. Over on that side, along the areas where the reeds are, we've seen a tricolored heron, great blue herons, snowy egrets, cattle egrets walking on the shore areas. All the birds that you'd find in central Florida, other than possibly by the seashore, all of them either are here regularly or pass through here.
Well, Frederick DeBary built this house in 1871, and this was actually just his hunting lodge. This was the smallest of his 5 houses, and him and his family would stay here for about 6 weeks out of the year in the wintertime. They'd come down and they'd swim here, they'd hunt here. It was just a fun time. And then they'd go back up to their main house in New York for the rest of the year.
Well, how did, this is his hunting lodge, his smallest house, okay? People would look at it and say, well, that's pretty much of a mansion. So
yeah.
This guy had money, okay?
Yes.
How did he make his money?
Well, he was a millionaire back then, and today $1 million is worth a lot more, or it was worth a lot more back then. He had 3 businesses. He had a steamboat business here in Florida. It ran from Jacksonville down here to Enterprise, or what used to be Enterprise. And he also had citrus groves here in Florida, right in front of the mansion. He had 6,000 acres of citrus. And then on top of that, he also had a share in the Mum Champagne Company. So.
Okay. And I'd always heard that he dealt in wine, champagne, that type of thing. So, okay. A lot of explanation along those lines, especially with the citrus groves here.
So the mansion is 100% original. It's been here for 146 years now. And that is the only thing here that is not free to view. It is $5 for adults, $4 for seniors, $2 for children to come and take a tour of the mansion. And then we also have the ice house, which is quite close to the mansion. It is a tiny little building with no windows, and they'd have ice imported from up north, and it would stay in there, and we still have that today. DeBary Hall is one of the biggest pieces of the town's history, and it's mostly all we have left to remember what happened here way back when.
Frederick DeBary, as you know, history shows, he built his originally a hunting lodge here, and then it became his full-time home. Once he relocated, you can see even how this comes right off of this, overlooks the St. Johns River. At one point in time, this was probably cleared and probably had a wide open view to the St. Johns River. The trail connection is just to our south here, and it's just a couple hundred yards off the trail. So I think the county, the city has recognized how important it is to create this nice access right off the trail system to it as well.
This area was a place that was frequented by Indians, and they traveled along St. Johns River and stopped here on Lake Monroe. And they would camp there and they would eat all the shellfish. And the rumor has it that they built a shell mitten as high as 40 feet tall. And that shell mitten was used to pave the roads here in Volusia County. Then shortly after that, we see people like the American soldiers coming in and building a fort, Fort Kingsbury. And that existed on the shores of Lake Monroe, probably about where Publix is. Then they were going to move out, and a gentleman named Cornelius Taylor decided that he wanted to live here. So he asked the government if he could homestead, and if he homesteaded, if he could keep the property. And they said, yes, keep the Indians away. So he built an area all along Green Springs, down by Stone Island. He had agriculture, he had an inn, he had employees, and he named this area Enterprise. He went to Tallahassee and incorporated it as a city and developed the area that we know as Enterprise today. And he lived here until his daughter died in 1849, and she's buried near Green Springs Park. And then he moved on, and then in came Jacob Brock and the Brock House. And Enterprise, incidentally, was the first county seat of Mosquito County, which is encompassed Central Florida. When that was divided into Orange County, Enterprise was the first county seat. And then when we became Volusia County, we were the first county seat of Volusia County. So we were a real mecca at one point in time.
A very, very much of an enterprise.
Yes, it
in
was.
Enterprise.
Yes,
Okay.
there was a lot of enterprise in Enterprise. We had businesses up and down Main Street. We had 2 hotels. We had a meat market. We had a jewelry store. We had all kinds of stores. So this road in the 1800s would have been a vibrant downtown.
Cindy, going back to the 1800s, which you just mentioned, okay, Enterprise being a historical area, I mean, how did people get to Enterprise? They weren't the road systems that we have today. I'm looking at a board here. It shows a lot of interesting information, but, you know, how did they get here and what did they do when they got here?
Well, you're correct. There were no roads, and the train stopped in Jacksonville. So what people did is they got off in Jacksonville, and they got on a steamboat, and they came down the St. Johns River. And they came here because, one, the weather was good. It was cold up north. And they came here because this area was just full of all kinds of wildlife. So the hunting was spectacular here. The fishing was spectacular here. And also we had mineral springs. We had green springs. We even had a spring down Benson Junction. And what they did is they soaked in these springs because they have a high sulfur content. And they thought that soaking in them would cure their tuberculosis or their arthritis.
We just left the Enterprise Heritage Center, had a very good visit here. Cindy Sullivan was talking about this area back in the 1800s. She mentioned lots of pine trees. In reality, what does that mean to the area? What did it look like back then, and what was the Enterprise around pine trees?
It would have looked very, very different than what we see today. You would have had large pine trees in this area, probably longleaf and slash. Those are being used for production of turpentine and for lumber. You had the big boating industry, shipping industry that needed those supplies. And of course, remember in those days, what you burned in your lamps was coal oil, was turpentine, and so there was a big demand for that chemical. So you would have seen pine forest here. Over time, the decision was made to introduce the oak trees. So the oak trees you see today all along this drive were planted.
This was citrus area at one time. It was from all the way over from DeBary Hall, all the way over through Green Spring. You will find citrus trees throughout, old ones throughout this area. And the citrus used to be the main crop for Florida. It's still, citrus is still an important crop for Florida. But back in the 1800s, it was big. And they would drain the land so that they could plant citrus and other vegetables and other crops as well, but that was one of the main ones. And so you'll see these kinds of canals all throughout the area, but this one is particularly a beautiful one because it just starts up in a few inches and it just gradually goes down to the lake and to the river, and it's now filled with all kinds of flora and fauna. So let's take a look at what's happening here. This is, we're deep into the 37 acres, almost 40 acres of this site. It's been untouched for generations, and as we know in Florida, when you don't have somebody in here all the time, that the nature just takes over. And certainly, when you look at the specimens around us, look at this palm here. And Jerry, I know you and I were talking about what its name is. I thought it was a canary date, but you said you think it's a phoenix palm. But we know that it's not supposed to be that tall, that full, that big. It's because there's a little microclimate in this little park here. It's right off of the river, Lake Monroe, and it's contained. It's low ground, and it just produces plant life that just grows wild. We have palms, and we have natives, and we have oak trees that are just unbelievable. It's a fairy tale land. I'm just loving this. But that particular specimen just fascinates me. It's been here for hundreds of years, I'm sure.
It's not a native species, but
No.
for us, it's a historical species.
It's a historical
tree.
tree.
It was part of when this was an active, occupied area.
Yeah, I'm sure that the Glass family planted those when they had their homestead here, and that would go back to the last century.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking that long ago.
But I'm looking at the cabbage palms and the pines. You can't even, you stand here, you can't see the top of them up in the foliage.
No.
Well, Jerry, what do you think about this?
Well, it looks like a limb off that oak tree right there is falling over.
Yeah, well, they nice seat here too.
Yeah.
Nice place to sit down here. These are kind of interesting. They, you know, we leave them here in the forest. We don't take them out. Used to always clean these things up, but they've become new habitat. There's a whole new life for this oak tree. All sorts of animals will burrow into it. Plants will grow on it. It will ultimately break down and become part of the soil. It releases its nutrients back into the ground.
So it becomes its own little bio or ecosystem built into it.
Absolutely. All sorts of plants and animals and fungus all growing here on this piece of wood as it ultimately rots and breaks down.
And in reality, it's a beautiful piece of wood. Look at the burl in it and everything.
Oh, it's just
like
wonderful.
It
It's
just
beautiful.
twists.
Beautiful old limb, you know, hundreds of years old. And as I said, it makes it an absolutely wonderful place to sit.
But being that it's a fairly thickly wooded area where we are here, there's certain species that are more prevalent here. We have the Carolina wren. It's a rusty-colored bird whose tail sticks up at an angle. That's how you tell a wren. We have the Carolina chickadee. Most people recognize chickadees. They have a black cap and a black throat. There are northern cardinals, which are, well, throughout western U.S., I mean, just everywhere. And lately we've been hearing a very high trill. I can't really repeat it. Like, it's called the northern parula. It's one of the songbirds, the warblers. It's about 4.5 inches long. The colors on it are blue, green, yellow, orange, and purple. Wow. It's a beautiful little bird.
All in the same bird?
All in the same bird. We also have the common tufted titmouse, the blue-gray gnatcatcher. A little while ago we heard some fish crows flying overhead. And there's another parula just talking. So we have quite a few birds.
Jerry, as we move through the park, we really have 4 different microclimates or zones we're going to be moving into, climatic zones.
Microclimate?
No, microclimate.
I like that.
They're really being controlled by moisture that's in the ground. We have different elevations here. And so here, a little bit higher, it's a little bit drier. It's dominated by oaks and the cabbage palms in here. Native tree for Florida, you know, a state tree. And the grapevines and understories of other smaller plants here.
And like that
Beautiful pine tree here,
huge.
big longleaf pine, very, very nice. And so, we see this climate here. But the next one we walk into is an artificial climate. This is a man-made climate where we went in and the city's created these 4 different levels of water that move through the system. It emulates a natural wetland.
Okay.
Alrighty, and so the idea is full of wetland plants. Because that climate is here, because that water is here, we have counted over 200 different species of birds using this park.
Okay, now I'll make a point there. Okay, you're the conservation vice president of West Volusia Audubon Society.
Correct.
Okay, so you're saying that is a statement from the Audubon Society, the 200 and everything. That's not the city saying.
That is not the city. That is Audubon. As you know, we're a full partner with the city on this project. We believe in it strongly. We're out here counting birds on a regular basis. We do a lot of birding tours out here, take people out here because of the ability to see that large variety of birds that we would not normally see because of that water feature that's there.
Okay.
As we go on from there, we move into a real wetland that is what we call an ephemeral wetland. It comes and it goes. It's here when it's wet and rainy, and when it dries out, the wetland dries out.
Is this where the boardwalk goes across?
Where the boardwalk goes across.
Okay.
This is a natural. We have people always asking me questions like, what has happened to the wetland? It's a natural cycle. That wetland was designed by nature to fluctuate through these dry and wet cycles.
Okay.
And today it's going to be dry, but other days it'll be full of water. So then from there we go into the oak hammock, a little bit wetter area than this one is. A little bit different trees there. Still have the oaks, predominantly an oak type forest, but underneath there you're going to see the plants you're going to see. Wax myrtles, you're going to see other plants that are more associated with a little bit wetter climate.
Rusty Lyonia.
Rusty Lyonias are in there.
Okay. So that's more, as you said, the oak hammock type?
Oak hammock.
Okay. So it's
all controlled by moisture, by water.
For what was the term you used?
Microclimates.
Microclimate. I like that. Okay. Microclimate.
Now, what would you expect to see here in the way of birds and other wildlife?
Well, mostly birds, of course. But as far as four-legged animals, mammals and all, you could have an occasional wild pig come through. Raccoons live around here. We had a report not too long ago about a bobcat. Mm-hmm. And in the wetlands further over, which the animals would still come through, there are deer seen regularly. And ultimately, there are black bear around. This is Central Florida. And in terms of what's in the trees, the birds, many of the birds are similar or the same species as we saw back at Thornby Park. Even though we have some minor wetlands here, this is still mostly upland, so we're not near Lake Monroe as we were, so we won't see ospreys and some of the birds of that nature here specifically.
One thing too, Jerry, just to mention, although we keep referring to this as a man-made or artificial wetland, it is rapidly functioning very much like a real wetland.
Yes, it is.
The wetland plants have been recruited, vegetation is right, and as far as the wildlife is concerned, this is no longer an artificial wetland. It's what they're looking for.
They don't know the difference. Yeah.
No, I mean, the duck population, which is mostly winter population, other than the black-bellied whistling ducks, we have blue-winged teal that come here, mallards, muscovies, green-winged teal, hooded mergansers, and we have duck-like birds known as grebes, the pie-billed grebe we find here in the winter as well. Also, if I may, going back to the breeding, it's not just in the water. Mm-hmm. The red-bellied woodpecker, the downy woodpecker, and the pileated woodpecker all lay the eggs and raise their young in the cavities of dead trees in the area.
Well, I know that one day when you were out, I were out here, we actually saw a roseate spoonbill here, which I think is rare to see something.
It's been a few years, but yes, we had roseate spoonbills and wood storks here. I mean, just wonderful, wonderful birds here.
Well, we're here on the boardwalk, and as everybody's looking up into that pine tree, we have two wood storks that have been sitting there a while, getting a lot of enjoyment out of watching them. I've seen a lot of other birds out here too in just the last 10 minutes. Eli, tell us about the birds we've been seeing a little bit out here.
First of all, concerning wood storks, I mean, they're wading birds. We expect to see them in shallow water, walking around feeding. And the water that we have here isn't here. This is called an ephemeral marsh. Part of the year it's got water in the rainy season. Other parts, like right now, there's a little puddle here and there. So it's kind of cool to see the wood storks up in the tree. Now they are obviously feeding somewhere, but not in this part of the park. And we've already had a flyover of almost a dozen black vultures. There was a red-tailed hawk, and we saw the red-shouldered hawk flying off to the side, and one of the anhingas was overhead. Mm-hmm. These bushes, I love them. These light green, the new leaves, these are button bushes. And in another month or two, they're going to have flowers that look like a ping pong ball made up of hundreds of little flowers. They're beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Steve, we're in the area that you had called not Oak Highlands, hammock?
Oak hammock.
Oak hammock, yes. Okay. Why is it an oak hammock?
Well, it's a little bit more moist, it's shady. We've got water all around us. We're a little bitty island here with wetlands all around us. And so the plants are responding very much to that wetter soil. Mm-hmm. You can feel it, and as you walk along here, this is a real spongy, soft, lots of softer than what we saw earlier. Not the soft sand, it's actually the vegetation that's soft. So that, and you really look around here, the palmettos are here in great numbers. A lot of these understory plants, we saw some liones here a little bit ago. And so we've got we talked about why it's important. The palmettos here are a great source of food for a lot of wildlife, including black bears. Mm-hmm. The berries, same berry they used to make the treatment for prostate, prostate, that one out. And but an abundant food source in here for a lot of wildlife. And we've seen bobcats just right down the way, and of course it's just so to see some deer sign. So there's a lot of wildlife that utilize this area.
Eli, we just saw a great egret. Am I correct? The white
Yes.
one, large white, just flying basically, I guess, from west to east behind us here just a moment ago. Beautiful bird. Tell us more about what we would expect to find in an oak hammock, bird-wise.
Well, you typically won't find your wading birds, your egrets, your herons, or your shorebirds, because there's no water directly here. But here you'll find the gray catbird, the tufted titmouse, the northern cardinal, northern mockingbird, several warblers in season.
Everyone, it's been a great day. We've had a good time here at Audubon Park. Thank you very much for joining us and being part of our tour here today.